Welcome back to An Audience of One by Gen Diversity, which we deliver spiritually uplifting and motivational content to individuals who need a reminder that they have worth, that they have value, and that they have a gift that they need to share with the world. And that regardless of how many mistakes that they've made, that it's never too late to make today the day that you change your life. You've hit a point in your life where you know where you're at. You know where you've been, you know where you could have been, and you know where you want to go. You're at a point where the excitement for moving forward is conflicted with the pain that you feel towards the events that have passed and the opportunities that you've missed. You could have just decided to give up. You could have looked at all of the things that you did in the past, decided that it's insurmountable, and just thrown in the towel. But instead, you've decided that you're going to forge a new path forward. But before you continue to move forward, you have to ask yourself, who are you doing this for? Because leading up into what eventually became your falling into an abyss of darkness where you felt like you'd done so many bad deeds that what was one more? You have to recognize that at some point in time, your feelings of concern for how other people viewed your shortcomings contributed to your eventual downfall. At some point, you felt like your mistakes were too big, or they were too many to be forgivable, and you just threw in the towel. You gave up on yourself because in part you thought if anybody else knew about your struggles, they'd give up on you too. Once you gave up on yourself, essentially you felt as if no transgression was too big because you've already reached the point at which you were unforgivable. And what was one more? I mean, when the house is most certainly going to burn down, what does it matter if you pour gasoline on it? Once you get to that point, you start to justify any evil because you're already damned and unforgivable. And when you get to that point, it's really easy to accumulate a lot of bad deeds. You spent so much time looking over the edge, you didn't realize you had already fallen in. And you kept digging and digging and digging the hole that you'd already dug for yourself deeper because you thought it couldn't get any deeper, but it did. The bottom of the pit was certainly not the bottom as you decided to go subterranean. And as your experience has proven to yourself, it's a very dark place down there. Part of the reason you felt worthless and unforgivable is because of the mistakes that you made early on and the way in which you looked at those mistakes, which was thinking that in the eyes of other people, which is really irrelevant, you felt unforgivable. And even furthermore, in front of God, you felt unforgivable. Those mistakes and your feelings about those mistakes opened up the floodgates to transgressions that you accumulated in the dark. And that accumulation of transgressions has now compounded the negative view that you have of yourself. And if you felt bad about yourself with regards to the initial transgressions that you fell into, which initiated your downward spiral, how do you feel about yourself now that you've accumulated all of these bad deeds after throwing in the towel of even caring about what you did in the first place? When you spend years giving up on yourself because you feel worthless, unforgivable, and unlovable, accumulating more of the very same bad deeds that made you feel worthless, unforgivable, and unlovable in the first place, it becomes extremely difficult when you finally wake up to overcome the weight, the immense weight that you feel, which is now multiplied in comparison to the anchor of the weight that originally dragged you down in the first place. Part of the reason why you fell into this negative mental loop in the first place is because you were concerned about how people would view you if they actually found out that you weren't like the highlight reel that they perceived you to be, and realized that you actually had serious faults. In a world where casting judgment has become sport, you damned yourself to a sentence of self-hate and self-sabotage of the very same transgressions that you felt disqualified you from any dignified existence or forgiveness. As much as the world would like to convince you that only weak people are concerned with what other people think about them, the reality is that the vast majority of people are concerned with what others think of them, and you were no exception. The fact that the vast majority of people broadcast their lives online, from every mundane action to their highlights, in order to seek affirmation of their lifestyle and every action that they take, should be proof enough. And while your issue might not be that you've been chasing affirmation of what you ate, how you dressed, or what you did over the weekend, you most certainly have been chasing affirmation of your right to exist, to be loved, to be welcomed, and to be part of a community. It's not so much that you're afraid of the insults or the slights that people might have for who they feel you are or have been. It's that you're afraid that they're true. So your problem, simply put, is not that you're a sinner that sees that you're righteous, but that you're a sinner that knows that you haven't been. You've allowed this to consume you and to perpetuate more of what's caused you to feel this way about yourself in the first place. And although you've woken up and found passion and purpose for your life again, you enter a world carrying a burden of shame where every individual bad deed that you've ever done feels unbearable. and absolutely crushing in their collective. You feel as if you're attempting to walk naked into a crowd that can see every scar, every blemish, and every deformity of the body of work that you've believed has become you. It's at these moments that you feel like you should just turn around, that there's going to be people that are going to tell you you're worthless, and you fear that they're right. Although you have the desire to be better and to rise above, you feel as if you lack the armor required to face the onslaught of the detractors for your newfound self. But you cannot give in to fear. First and foremost, there is only one that is to be feared, and that is God. He is well aware of every single transgression that has ever originated from your soul and its severity. And so there's absolutely no need to waste another moment worrying about whether somebody else is keeping count. You've spent years obsessing over your actions. Enough is enough. It's in the past. There's nothing you can do about it now. The only thing that you can control is what is in front of you. Second is because your action and inaction should be done for God's sake and God's sake alone, not for what these people think or don't think. None of them mean anything in the grand scheme of things. If the whole world turns against you and hates you and curses you, you need to stand like a lighthouse in defiance of the waves that bash against it. So long as you stand in truth and in good deeds as you move forward, then their onslaught, however it comes, is of no concern to you. The reality is that anyone of any righteous consciousness is going to be so overconsumed with their own shortcomings that they won't have time for yours. As for the people that may try to put a spotlight on you, realize that only a diseased person would try to put a man down when he's trying to better himself. Also, know that hurt people, and it's possible that you hurt this person and they feel like the only way that they can get that hurt off of them is by passing it back on to you. Or maybe somebody else hurt them and they feel that the only way that they can feel better about themselves is passing that hurt on to you, which somebody had originally passed on to them. Regardless, the fact of the matter is that hurt people hurt people. Hurt people hurt themselves, and hurt people hurt other people. So those people that may try to hurt you further by bringing up how you've hurt yourself in the past are most certainly hurt people. And you should feel less hurt by them and more compassion for them because you realize better than anybody else how difficult it is for you to express yourself with the hurt that you feel inside of yourself in a healthy manner. Lastly, know that it's quite possible that nobody even cares what you're doing. Because for the most part, you're dead to the rest of the world. Remember that nobody cares what you're doing when you're unsuccessful. People don't usually hate on people that are below them, unless they're really sick. Remember, you're not even on their radar. But once you start to rise above and better yourself, and the crowd starts to thin out, then the spotlight starts to come back on you. So in a very weird way, you get to actually experience the elusive feeling of having to worry about success. In other words, nobody's actually going to care about bringing up how worthless you are because of your transgressions in the past, unless you actually pull yourself up out of the gutter and improve your life, which isn't exactly the worst problem to have. Although those things may hurt when some of them are said, because some of them will be true, remember that at that point, those comments will be coming from a position of envy. How could a person of your horrible station rise above and better themselves? Trust that it is as much a reflection of their inability to do what you've done as it is their desire that you had stayed where you were. But at the end of it, there's still that fear and that pain of the inevitable people who are going to try to drive you back down into the depths of despair from which you came and suffered over all of those years. So how do you deal with that? The best path to take is to wear the lessons you've learned through your shortcomings, your mishaps, and your transgressions as armor, instead of presenting them to others as daggers to be used against you. This is not to say that you should be proud of your transgressions, but you should be proud of the fact that you recovered from them. And you should be proud of the invaluable lessons that you've learned along the way. In this way, no one can ever use them against you because no one looks at them as horribly as you look at them. And no one understands the length at which you struggled to overcome them. And that, in and of itself, is a great deed that, fortunately, many will never have to experience. Embrace it. Whatever they say about you is true. In fact, it's way worse than they could imagine. And that is why you should celebrate your recovery for the blessing that it is. Because although you looked over the edge and you fell in, most people never recover from that, and you did. Remember that whatever words of hurt people may spread about you, that no one can ever hurt you the way that you've hurt yourself. And no one can ever do that again but you. The lessons that you've learned are invaluable to those that may come after you. and they're invaluable to those that are still wandering in the wilderness that is enveloped in darkness. While the world projects itself as crushing every aspect of life, the truth of the matter is that the vast majority of people are struggling. Many of them are flailing. And the weight of pretending that they are not only doing okay, but that they are thriving is eventually going to be a weight that will drown them. Your ability to reach others by being vulnerable about your situation and as standing as an example for why not to fall in the first place, and as an example of how to overcome and rise out for those that have fallen into those places, is more valuable than you realize, and is quite frankly desperately needed. Your priority at this point in your life should be to develop yourself. You need to create a solid foundation of spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional health. You need to create an environment that is conducive to the success of those goals. Don't worry about what the crowd shouts at you while you're in the ring with a heavyweight who's throwing haymakers of doubt, fear, addiction, depression, and despair at your head. Just worry about winning the fight. You still have a long way to go. Know that your fight is a noble one. Just as your downfall serves as a lesson for others, so too does your fight to come back from it. There are lessons learned surviving the darkest depths of evil and misguidance that can't be learned elsewhere. This doesn't mean that anyone else should encourage anyone else to go to these places and study, but it happened. You went and you learned. You learned the importance of creating and maintaining a solid relationship with God because you learned what happens when you don't. You learned the power of staying vigilant in prayer and in good deeds because you learned how far you can fall when you don't. You've learned humility as you've realized that no one is safe from falling into transgressions no matter how large. And for that reason, you've learned that it's important to protect yourself from any transgression, no matter how small. You've learned the pitfalls of superficial relationships and fair-weather friends. And for this reason, you've learned the importance of finding the strength in going it alone. You've learned patience and perseverance, as at every moment, that voice inside of your head is screaming at you to give up, yet you continued to move forward and you continued to fight. And most importantly, you've learned that you can come back from this. And if you can come back from this, you can come back from almost anything. And you've learned these things the hard way. And lessons learned hard are hard to forget. Some people will belittle you because of your age or your status for falling into such mistakes. But the reality is that there's no age and there's no status by which you're protected from making mistakes. Some of us learn young, some of us learn old, some of us learn the easy way, some of us learn the hard way, but some people never learn at all. So be thankful that you did. Others may focus on your faults. I say focus on your efforts to overcome them. It's easy to run down the mountain. It's even easier to go down if you throw yourself off a cliff. It's a lot harder to climb back up, especially after you've taken a nasty fall. Let them say what they will. They'll never say things more hurtful than the things that you've said about yourself. It may be that everything they say about you is true, but your efforts to improve yourself are the only reason they even bring it up, and the reason it'll never be so again.